Well, I think before I get started, I think everybody's obviously most concerned overall about how Seabright is recovering from the storm. I think that's the most important topic on everybody's mind. This budget presentation talks specifically about the 2013 budget, but also we'll talk a little bit about what Seabright has ahead. But I think what's important to note right up front is that without the assistance of our state and federal partners, this budget would not be anything close to what it is now. Specifically, FEMA through the Community Disaster Loan Program, HUD through the Community Development Block Grant Program, and the New Jersey Division of Local Government Services through General Budget Assistance have provided the support to allow Seabright to continue its history of fiscal stability with the 2013 municipal budget. So Jack, if you can hit that button there, and we'll get started. Who thought that Jack would be the technology guy all this time? Some of the obvious, there's a special award for this.
New tin can and strings.
And some of the obvious things that we want to talk about with the 2013 budget is the impact of the storm. There were some questions earlier about the special emergencies, the borrowing and things of that nature that the borough did to get through the storm. The borough did authorize $6 million in special emergency notes to cover not just debris removal, but also some of the recovery efforts, a substantial portion of the recovery efforts. The borough has since borrowed $3 million against that $6 million. We have not yet borrowed the second $3 million. So we have $3 million borrowed, $3 million authorized in the general budget. We also had $500,000 in special emergency notes in the beach utility and $200,000 in the sewer utility. The lost rateable base, which is the largest impact initially and something that we feel will recover from over the next few years, the lost rateable base is roughly 14%, $70 million in lost rateable base. What that means is about $1,185,000 of lost tax revenue for 2013. Fortunately, you'll see as we go through this budget, the Community Disaster Loan and the Essential Services Grant will offset that and allow us to move forward with some stability. Stable department budgets are a requirement, not just something that the borough has constantly done. Those of you who are department heads I see in the room and out back, you're familiar with the fact that the borough has maintained a very tight rein on spending year to year. That's something that does not change for 2013. The storm recovery costs are charged to the special emergency and reimbursed by FEMA, paid off through notes and things of that nature. But the operations of the borough are particularly charged to are specifically charged to the municipal budget. The future costs of rebuilding are obviously a concern for the borough as we move forward. We think we have a great deal of meetings and discussions in regard to what the local impact will be of rebuilding municipal structures and the infrastructure and everything else that the borough is responsible for. While a great majority of that is covered by FEMA, and there's other insurance and things of that nature that offset that, in some cases there is a municipal match, and we consider that as we move forward with each project. The school tax impact seems to be offset. The school has made application for community disaster loan. We were looking at a very significant tax rate increase from the regional school district. They've been awarded or preliminarily awarded a substantial community disaster loan, which should offset that school tax impact. So the borough should not feel any significant impact from the regional school district. At least that's as reported from the Division of Local Government Services. Jeff, if you go to the next one, let me just follow along here. There we go. So, some of the mission statement of the budget, and I just want to talk about a few things. I spoke a little bit about the storm recovery and fiscal stability of the borough. One thing, ever since the storm, the bond rating agencies obviously have been on top of the situation in the borough of Seabright. We report weekly to the bond rating agencies, so they're aware of what we're doing, in addition to reporting to the Division of Local Government Services. What I can say is that Moody's, which certainly the borough has no influence over the bond rating companies, just like I think during one of the statements, they have no problem downgrading GM or General Electric or somebody else along that line. They have no problem telling Seabright they're not doing a good job. But instead, what's happened is twice since the storm, Moody's has reaffirmed the borough's A1 bond rating. So that's been a reflection of the continued fiscal stability and tight rein that the Borough Council has held on the budget and our overall financial operations. Jack, you can move on. I think we'll get into more about the impact there. So this 2013 budget, what I really should say is the tax rate increase is 9/10 of 1 cent. So it's just below 1 cent per $100 of assessed value. So the tax rate for 2013 will be 77.5 cents compared to 76.6 cents last year. So 9/10 of 1 penny is the increase. It's equivalent to $9.90 per $100,000 of assessed value on the average home. Jack, you can continue through. The budget comparison, now that top number for 2013 is going to actually change. If you see down at the bottom, it's actually going to be $7,570,000. There's a budget amendment that'll be introduced soon after this hearing is completed that will change the amount of the 2013 budget from $8,070,000 to $7,570,000. That's really because the state has asked us to redistribute some of the funding that they're providing to us into the sewer utility and the beach utility. So in reality, what you see is 2009, 10, 11, and 12, the borough's budget has been relatively stable. 2013, the increase in the budget is really completely attributable to repaying the special emergency notes. We're making a substantial repayment back on the borrowing. As a matter of fact, excuse me one second, in excess of $1 million is being repaid on the $3 million that we borrowed. Just grab this. Sorry about that. So, give me 1 second so I can give you a good number here. $1,038,000. So of the $3 million that we borrowed, we're paying back $1,038,000 in this budget. In addition to that, there's various grants and loans that are that drive up the overall bottom line of the budget to that $7.5 million. But in general, the increase in the budget is attributable to the storm itself. All right, Jack, if you go on to the next one.
Pushed the wrong button.
Oh, no.
Oh, no, my God, here we go.
Okay, there we go. So the amount to be raised by taxation for 2012 was $3,968,000. For 2013, the amount to be raised by taxation has been reduced to $3,471,000. By making that $500,000 reduction in the amount to be raised by taxation, we're able to put forth a tax rate that matches the reduction in lost rateables. So as a result, you see that less than 1 penny increase in taxes. So when you match this against the new rateable base, we have a reduced tax rate as a result. Jack, if you can continue on.
Mm-hmm.
The average home in 2013 is assessed at $363,580. That's down from an assessment, an average home of roughly $400,000 for 2012. The tax rate is 77.5 cents, so the average tax paid by residents in Seabright is $2,817.75 for municipal purposes. So on the average home, this budget reflects a $32 per year increase in taxation. The other one. The other on the right side. There we go. Now you're doing fine. All right. This is just a pie that breaks down, and I'll make this available to the borough to place on the website if they'd like, so you can read it in more detail. But what this shows is how your tax revenue, or how the overall revenue, not just tax revenue, how the overall revenue, how the municipal dollar is spent. And you can see in this budget, roughly $500 is being spent. This is on a $300,000 home. Roughly $500 of the taxes being spent to repay the debt from the storm. If you look around the rest of it, public safety is the only thing that comes close to the amount that we're actually repaying the debt at $474. Some of the impacts, regulatory impacts on the budget. This is year to year, and these do not go away. With this year's budget, we did not have a waiver from still having to comply with the appropriations cap and the levy cap. So this budget is not only compliant, but we're well below the the appropriations cap and the levy cap, and I'll show you that in a subsequent slide. The unfunded mandates, pension contributions, state aid, state health benefits, and where we are, in subsequent years, all are impacts that we have to plan for, not just in this budget, but in subsequent budgets and previous budgets. You can hit the button there, Greg. I know I'm taking you away from taking your copious notes there.
You want me to push the button? You can bring it.
The other state mandates that typically impact the budget, and it's not something that I really want to get stuck on now because I think we want to talk more about the storm impact and the bottom line of this budget. But binding arbitration, training mandates, master plans, things of that nature typically are things that are unfunded mandates that drive up costs, local costs in the budget. Next. All right, this is just this is a state aid as a percentage of operating revenue. What this really shows is how state aid has been, not just slowly, has continually been decreasing as a percentage of operating budget. So the burden of municipal operations falls more and more on the local property taxpayer, less and less on state revenues that had previously been dedicated for property tax relief. And this includes, I know we've had this discussion a number of years, this includes revenue that is utility revenue that used to come directly to the borough, that now goes to the state, and then gets funneled back to the borough after a substantial portion is shaved.
I was going to say it does.
And
You're
as you
perfect
can
world.
see, just in 2004, roughly 6% of our budget was offset by state aid. This year, it's below 2%. If you can continue that on. So about 1/3 of what we used to receive. This is a little misleading because a great deal of our revenue is going to come this year from federal aid, from community disaster loan and community development block grant. So what actually is happening this year is, typically the borough, the taxpayer is paying somewhere in the 60 to 75% range of the overall budget costs. This year it will be about 43% because the balance will be offset by community development block grant and the essential services grant. I'm sorry. Next. Just a quick run through the appropriations cap. We have an appropriations cap. We're allowed to appropriate $4.3 million in total appropriations. We did budget about $3.7 million, so we're about $600,000 below the appropriations cap. So we could increase taxes, or we could increase the appropriations within the cap, within the budget by $600,000 and still be compliant with this regulation. So this just reflects continuing spending restraints. Jeff, good. The next one is the levy cap calculation. This is the amount that we could pass on in taxation, and we're $650,000 below the amount that we could actually raise in taxation. Next. You can go on to the next one. Where your tax dollar goes, this just shows that roughly 36% goes to the school districts, 26% goes to the county, 33% goes to the municipality, and about 5% goes for the reserve fund collected. So we'll talk a little bit, next slide, about the reserve fund collected. As you can see, as a result of the storm, we had a significant drop-off in current taxes being paid on time. While it's still a good number, 95% of the taxpayers still paid 100% of their taxes prior to the end of the year. Roughly 5% did not. And that's a significant impact on the budget. Every percentage drives up a significant amount of taxes that have to be raised. So typically we like to be 97% or more. This year we're down to 95%. We're anticipating roughly the same amount, 94 to 95% for 2013. So that affects us subsequent years, and it affects our ability to recreate surplus from year to year. Next slide there. This is how surplus is generated. Unfortunately for us, surplus was not really generated at a significant level in 2012, primarily as a result of what you just saw, the decrease in taxes collected. Typically, delinquent tax collections bring in a small amount of surplus generated. Last year, it actually decreased surplus by about $11,000. Current tax collections typically bring in $150,000 to $200,000 in surplus generation. Last year, it actually was an $11,000 deficit. So typically, we would regenerate somewhere in the range of the amount of surplus we used to offset our budget. Last year, we were unable to do that. You can hit the next slide and I can explain. Last year, we opened the year with $822,000 in surplus. We utilized $480,000 of that surplus in the budget to keep the tax rate down. Typically, we would generate somewhere in the range of $480,000 in surplus, so we would end the year with roughly $820,000. Unfortunately, as a result of the storm, we were only able to generate a little less than $300,000 in surplus. So as a result, our balance is $638,000 at the end of the year. The positive thing is a result of the community development, the Essential Services Grant and the community disaster loan. Part of that is they don't require us to utilize any of our surplus in this budget. So we're going to maintain that $638,000 of surplus through this budget year. We're not going to utilize that within the budget, and we're going to hope to rebuild back up to that $800,000 range for the 2014-2015 budgets. Next slide. This is just our surplus history. The top line is the surplus balance at the end of each year. So you can see, for the last 6 or 7 years, we've been roughly in that $800,000 range with a slight drop off from this year. The yellow line is the amount that we use in the budget each year, which is roughly in that $480,000, $500,000 range. And then the bottom line, which goes up to the top, is the balance that would typically be left at the end of the year. So you can see typically our surplus history is pretty good. Going back to, if you want to go back to a previous slide, 2004 is also the year that we started to see significant drop off in state aid. So 2004 may have been a better year for surplus regeneration, but as we lost state aid, we were able to maintain stability and surplus for several years. Next slide. This is taxable values, and this is where you see the significant drop off as a result of the storm. You see a drop off of roughly $70 million, which is 13.6% of the total rateable base, which we lost as a result of the storm. Obviously, reconstruction of properties will help build that back over time, but that's the most significant revenue generator impact that we're having, that we're trying to recover from. Unfortunately for us is the Essential Services Grant is a multi-year program. It should be available again for us in 2014. Unfortunately, the community disaster loan was capped at the amount that we actually received for this year, so we won't have the ability to go back for that funding in 2013. But we are working closely with Division of Local Government Services to ensure that the 2014 budget impact on property taxpayers is very similar to the impact that 2013 is having, which is minimal. You could. All right, the issues, like I just said, the community disaster loan and technically the community development block grant are one-time revenues. Typically, that's something we avoid in the borough. We try not to have one-time revenues that cause spikes in taxation. One year it's down, next year it's up. We try to have, we strive for stability and good fiscal strength. These one-time revenues are absolutely necessary as a result of the storm and absolutely understandable as a result of the storm. There's no pension deferral, there's no school tax deferral, there's no cap waivers, there's no fiscal year debt, there's no extraordinary aid. We haven't done anything that would lead anybody to believe that we could not recover from this event. We're paying our special emergency notes, our bond rating stays strong, and we're continuing to work with FEMA on public assistance and rebuilding. So, while it's a brutal, very stressful process, it's something that we're continuing to work through, and by no means can you believe that the borough of Seabright won't come back from this storm. So next slide. That's state aid. You can go to the next slide. That's actually yeah. Well, if you go back to that slide, I'll explain what that is real quickly. You don't know how to do that?
No.
What?
He does now.
He's getting a tan from the computer already. The top line, the red line, is the amount of, that's the statutory amount that we should be receiving in state aid year after year, pursuant to the, and when I say statutory, it's law. That's what's required that we get paid. Unfortunately, only the state can break the laws. So the bottom line is the amount that we actually receive year to year. So you can see there's a large gap between what we're entitled to and what we receive. This year we received roughly half of what we're entitled to. And that gap will just continue to grow as the years go out. Okay, next slide. Tax stabilization plan, obviously, it's restoring the rateable base is the biggest tax stabilization plan. Continuing to look at interlocal service agreements, innovative methods of service delivery, school tax reform, which has been on this list for years and is out of our local control, but it's something that certainly the borough supports and I want to say fights for on a regular basis. Labor agreements, we've had a great deal of success in maintaining costs of our labor, and we'll have to continue to do that to maintain some stability. Next slide.
Thank you.
And just continuing on, regionalization, consolidation, energy conservation, all things that we'll think about as we rebuild the borough, appropriate rehabilitation of the borough, conservative debt issuance. You know, this is an important part moving forward, is, you know, as we look at what the borough's share of reconstruction is going to be, we have to be very careful about the amount of debt that we take on as a result of that, and obviously restoration of the tax base. All right, just the major cost centers, and I see the biggest cost center is just off the board here. There you go, at the very end, the very light blue. That's the recovery costs. So if you look at and this will be on the website so you can see in greater detail, but the first grouping of costs are police salary and wages. As you can see, a great deal of stability there. There's some growth there year after year, obviously. Police pension costs, some stability there. Public pensions, health benefits, a little bit of growth there. Reserve for uncollected, unfortunately, as a result of the storm, we have a spike in the reserve for uncollected. The various insurances, streets and road maintenance, refuse collection, all still remain somewhat stable. Debt service, there's a slight bump up in debt service. This debt service is planned. This was debt that was issued over these last 2 years. So we did expect a slight bump up, and then we expect that to come back down a little bit as overlapping debt starts to retire. Utilities remain somewhat stable, but in the end, the storm recovery costs are significant in this budget, but they are not significant in your tax bill. Next slide. The beach utility, just talk real quickly about the beach utility. Believe it or not, in 2012, it was still a self-liquidating utility, which means that it brought in enough revenue to offset its costs. Yeah, I misspoke earlier about the amount of the special emergencies. The beach utility special emergency is $1 million, and I believe the sewer utility was $400,000. Well, we'll see in a moment. But the beach utility special emergency is $1 million. The 2012 operations were on target, with the exception of the storm impact at the end of the year, which required the special emergency. Unfortunately, for 2013, we don't project that the revenues would be sufficient for full beach operations. We recognize that beach operations will be scaled back somewhat. So we did reduce the beach utility somewhat, but the community disaster loan, here it says CDBG support, but today's amendment that'll be heard after this, the community disaster loan will actually be appropriated to help offset the difference in beach utility revenue and beach utility appropriations, so that that beach utility does not operate in a deficit for 2013. Next slide. Sewer utility, same thing. Storm utility was a self-liquidating operation for 2013, but barely because of that fourth quarter operations were rather difficult. Moving forward, there's no change in the sewer rate for 2013. The sewer utility was stabilizing prior to the storm. Moving forward, we'll have to see what the costs are there. We have low debt in the sewer utility. Prior to the storm, the sewer utility was very fiscally stable, very, very fiscally healthy utility. So you can hit that next slide. So our projections moving forward, 2014 and 15, we project stable budget operations. We don't see any of our departments or any unnecessary hiring or things of that nature. We see continued fiscal restraint. We hope to see some surplus regeneration as we go through these next several years. Continued compliance with the levy cap and the appropriations cap. Continuing to work in support of restoration of property on the rateable base. And obviously the need in 2014 for essential services aid once again. The essential services aid is aid that comes through HUD, through the Community Development Block Grant to the state, which the state then portions out based upon need. And what we're actually using it for in the borough of Seabright is for police operations, fire operations, and solid waste removal. So it's being used strictly for essential services that are provided to the community.